Hi chickens, we're having another episode of Deep Chats today, and this time I'm talking to Zelda Violet Star from Violet Star Tarot, and we're going to talk about pro card slinging, the good, the bad and the ugly, the ups, the downs and the sideways bits, the crunchy and the smooth, because I'm a pro card slinger, Zelda's a pro card slinger, and so when I was thinking of what Deep Chats I wanted to do, I thought I do want to talk to someone else who runs a business, at least one person who runs a business. You'll be probably the first of many because there's lots to talk about. And also, you know, I do a lot of business mentoring, and most of the people that I business mentor are asking me, how do I become a pro card slinger? How do I make it full time? What would you say are the great bits of it, the not so great bits of it, what to watch out for and stuff? So I know that this one is going to be important for those people who ask me that all the time. So hello Zelda, welcome to Deep Chats.
Hi Kellyanne, it's lovely to be on here and have a chance to kind of share my experiences, and yeah, the good and the bad and the tricky and the stuff that you solve easily and the stuff that you kick into the long grass and deal with later on, because there's plenty of that as well.
Amen and hallelujah. And we're both based in the UK. I'm based in Kent, you're based in London, so that's also nice to have two English accents on the same live. I feel like I get quite excited when I meet other UK peeps who are witches or pro card slingers, because I'm mostly hanging out with people that aren't from the UK. I feel like it's really popular here, but there aren't as many people with channels or that I meet that have businesses and channels. You've got a channel on YouTube as well, haven't you?
I do. You can find that. If you just search up Violet Star Tarot, you'll find me quite easily.
Yeah, I'm going to leave everything of yours down below and give you a chance at the end as well to direct people anywhere else, but I'm going to make sure all the links are there. That will be my job, to make sure people can find you. So I thought we'd start with talking about positive stuff first, because I know when I messaged you, I was like, the first thing I said, I read it back earlier, and it was like, I want to get into the nitty gritty, the crappy stuff, the difficult things. And then later I was thinking, let's start with the positive stuff first. Let's not get it on too much of a downer straight away. So I suppose before I get into the positive stuff, how long have you been pro card slinging for, and what would you say your experience overall has been like so far?
Okay, so I've been reading professionally for just coming up to 2 years. It'll be 2 years next month. So that's been kind of ramping up since I started. That's the easiest way to look at it, because it's not something I feel where you dive in and you're instantly busy, but it's been a steady progress, steady increase in terms of number of people I'm helping. It's been a steady increase in terms of the content that I'm putting out as well, different channels that I'm using for that, but the volume of it, hopefully the quality of it, the variety of it as well. And you know, I mix things up at times, so it's never boring. And I work with private clients. I predominantly work online. I do some in-person work, I do some events, and as of a few months ago, I've been doing some hotline work as well, which is its own kind of challenge, comes with its own good and bad points. But it's been a really positive experience overall. And when I say that, it's kind of like, yeah, it can be really stressful at times. It can be really intense, or it can be really quiet. You're entirely working off your own back. By the same token, every job is challenging, and I've had plenty of jobs that I get far less out of than this. So, you know, it's difficult. It's not a straightforward thing to do. You have to be able to think on your feet. You have to be very, very adaptable, very intuitive beyond the readings themselves. And you have to be responsible for the stuff that at times is less fun, which is keeping accounts, keeping spreadsheets, marketing, you know, analytics, things like this, which are not why most of us get into this, but ultimately it's all a big part of it. It's a big learning experience as well. And I'm quite lucky in the sense that since I've started doing this, I've made a lot of really, really good contacts. Obviously, you're one of them, but there's a lot of good contacts who I've made, people who rate my work, people who I've worked with. All of this is really pleasant. like you, I'd say the majority of my contacts are not in this country. The majority of people who I've networked with professionally are not in this country. They're mostly in North America. I would say that I get more private clients from North America than anywhere else as
Yeah.
well. And I feel it's a cultural thing that you've alluded to. There's a cultural thing in terms of metaphysical and occult stuff in general, and in terms of what's sort of catching on over there as well, because yeah, we're trendy at the moment, and that's nice. You know, it's it's nice that there's other people reading. It's nice there's more and more. It's nice to kind of be in vogue and get more interest that way as well. I hope that continues. You know, it's a cultural shift going on at the moment.
There is, yeah.
There's also, when you work in this way, you notice like the culture in North America is more geared towards hiring service workers, hiring freelance service workers, paying service workers. So while I do get plenty of work in this country as well, it's also the case that culturally you're going to do better, I feel, if you're open to people from across the world. And there are astrological reasons why my work goes down better in North America as well that relate to my own chart that I could get into, but that'd be getting really, really deep into things. But there's a number of reasons basically, but the internet kind of opens this stuff out, if you like, and that's also really,
Yeah,
really helpful because you're not just like the local town reader anymore. Like
right.
you're now using, if you're using YouTube, using Instagram, Facebook, some people use Twitter, and you know, people therefore from across the world potentially are accessing your content, able to access you. And similarly, it means that when I'm hiring people for readings or for any other services, I have that available as well, and it's really opened things up.
I like that. I like working online. I'm not adverse to doing events and doing face-to-face stuff, and I do really like reading face-to-face with friends, or if it comes up, can you come and do this evening or whatever. I've got no issue with that. It's not that I'm scared of it, but I'm so glad that I do the majority of my work online, and I also feel that it's much easier for me. I'm not saying I can't business mentor for somebody who wants to do it mostly for events, or you know, mostly for parties, or wants to have some situation in a bricks and mortar setup. I can advise people on that, but I prefer to advise for people that want to work exclusively online and don't want to be, well, one of the reasons I love to do it online is that I'm not dependent upon any particular location for work, and I can leave my location whenever I want to. I can work abroad, I can do any of that. So that's where I'm more comfortable business mentoring. And I knew straight away from the off that I wanted to work online. And a lot of what you say is resonating with me as well. And I find that, you know, also of course, North America is just a much huger territory as well. And Canada's a huger territory. But like, I do think that there is something cultural. And like you said, and this is what I was talking about with Thorn in the last deep chat that I did, like we're hot right now. It happens like maybe once a decade, once every 15 years, that suddenly it's the thing everybody wants to be, and it's interesting. Everything witchy and everything tarot related becomes interesting. Of course, I didn't feel like I was dependent upon that. I didn't feel like that coming along was something that helped me to go full time, because I was already full time. But I hear from a lot of people that have been doing it for less time than me that it's been brilliant, like just having that interest. And you know, a lot of it is very genuine interest. It's not interest that is fueled just by what's popular. I think just the fact that it's popular has woken people up into it that would have not found a portal into it otherwise. How did you know, because this is something people ask me so much, how did you know you were ready to go from just reading the cards to actually reading for people? And how would you advise someone who's like, oh, I've been reading for a while, I'm comfortable, I envision myself reading for people, but I don't know if I'm ready? How would I know if I'm ready?
I have a really simple answer to that, and that is I went professional. I started advertising my services the moment a couple of people had received my readings and then turned around and offered me money for them. And it's as
Right.
simple as that. It's like if people are prepared to pay you for your work, they value your work, they see something in you, then you have the option to start doing that for money. And whether you're doing that as a side hustle, as a part-time job, or whether you go all in full-time, or whether you vary that at different times, that's kind of, for me, that's the key moment. And I don't see any other way around it, because it's like, okay, if someone's willing to pay me, I must be onto something here. There must be some value in my work. And if I have the time, if I have the ability to do that, if I actually need the work, which I do, and prefer that to what I was doing before, then I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start advertising myself and see where it goes. You know, I'm going
Yeah.
to basically give the signal that I'm ready and see what happens, if you like, because that's useful. And then you're taking action, then you're saying, okay, I'm going to do this. Let's see what happens from here.
Totally. And you said before, one of the sort of the downsides, the not so great things, is not being instantly busy or having these gaps where there isn't work. And presumably you feel like that's the time where you make content, you market, you do the things you need to do to bring the clientele in or develop the audience. Would you say when people have that quiet time, they really need to be, you know, focusing on the marketing, the development of content and all those other things? Because I think people get a bit stuck. They're like, oh, I haven't had any clients for a while. What do I do?
Yeah, I mean, I still hit these times now. You know,
Same.
for a couple of years, but I still hit these times now. It's like during my first year when I was waiting for my website to be set up, and eventually I just got on and did it myself. I'm not going to get into the details, but there was a long delay and whatever else, and I got it set up, and that gave me a boost. But I went, I think, at one stage in my first year, a period of 4.5 months without getting a client, and you start tearing your hair out and whatever else and be like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? You come back to your own practices, your own meditations, you read for yourself. I took more classes as well at that time, which is always a good thing to do. And I also looked at what I was doing in terms of marketing and so on, because some things are effective, some are not. And you tend to find that out as you go. So like my first year, I spent quite a lot of money on Facebook marketing, and it got me a whole bunch of followers. Didn't really get me any clients, or very few at least. So I had to mix it up. I had to change it up. And part of that as well was getting some outside guidance and coaching, getting some ideas going. The shift actually that I've made to YouTube this year has made a big difference in terms of that, and that's a big part of it. The other side of it when you are quiet is you can fall into really thinking hard about how long it's been, or what you're doing, or what your bottom line looks like, or whatever else. And you can really start to energetically block yourself that way as well. And it's not the only factor, but it's a real thing. And it's kind of like, look, go and do something. Go do something else. Go for a walk, you know? Go and get a massage. Have
Oh
a
my
weekend
God,
away.
yes.
Have a weekend away if you can afford one, like whatever. But don't just sit there kind of kicking yourself over this, because do any good whatsoever. And an awful lot of us working in this line of work, I wouldn't say all of us, but a lot of us, you know, we're doing this because we want to help. We're doing this because we want to help people through stuff they're going through. An awful lot of us have probably come from tricky experiences earlier in life, or more recently in life. And that can give you a really strong perfectionist streak, a demand to be instantly successful. It can give you a really fierce inner critic, and you have to start working on that, dealing with that. So you also have to look at your own healing, your own process in the middle of that as well, because that's going to be ongoing. And inevitably, when you're doing this kind of work, you're going to meet people and have experiences that start to reflect that stuff back to you as well. So the quiet periods are one of those things. They're not the only difficult thing. They do drive you nuts. I'm not going to lie about that. One of the reasons I started doing hotline work is also to fill in the gaps, you know,
Yeah.
and it's challenging, but you're busier doing it. And it's challenging because you have to get much sharper, much quicker, fast, because you tend not to be sitting down with somebody for a pre-booked half hour or an hour or whatever. But yeah, the worst thing you can do with that, and it's true across the board in life, but it's sitting there, it's fixating on it, it's focusing on it, because it does shift, it does change, especially if you're doing inspired stuff, and if you're looking at dropping what isn't working as well. You know, these are the other things.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned the doom and gloom mentality that happens when you haven't had a client for a while, and you feel like, honestly, I've done it before. In the early days of my business, I'd be like, well, that's it. But I thought it was all going so well, and it's over now. I'll never get another client again. And I would think something's happened, like, you know, that I don't know about. Like there's somebody maybe bad mouthing me somewhere, or it's just something in the stars, and it was just a blip. And it's really doesn't help. And yeah, it's one of a few variables, but my goddess, it really doesn't help matters at all. And yeah, if you can do anything in that time that is productive and sensible to do, that's the best. And it kind of leads me on to something else that I get asked a lot with business mentoring, when people want to be pro card slingers or they're on their journey but there's been a block. We get into a conversation, like you said, about how some of your clients will mirror stuff back to you that you need to deal with. You will be triggered by things that come up in some readings. You will find that some people have a problem, which is exactly your fucking problem. And you read through their problem and you're like, oh, that is what I need to do. And then you need to separate yourself from their need, because it is their need. But at the same time, it's going to remind you of, it's a direct reflection of what's happening in your own reality. So for that, I always end up talking to people about preparing and then also aftermath. So how do you mentally prepare to do readings, you know, for clients who are in all kinds of different situations, some of which are going to trigger you, some of which are going to be problems you've seen time and time over, and you may not necessarily think that the way they're framing the question is the most useful thing for them anyway. So you might have a little bit of a, let's say, a compassionate gripe with the way that they put their question anyway. And sometimes you might just do a lot of readings in a day. You might already have your own shit going on. So how do you find it best to prepare to do readings, and then also how to decompress afterwards and make sure that your shit is your shit and their shit is theirs, and you've separated after the time of giving of yourself?
Of course. I mean, with myself, like prior to a reading, obviously, I'm going to look over what's been sent through. If they haven't sent much through, that's fine. If they have, that's also fine. I ask people to give me as much detail as they're comfortable with, and I work with what's there. I ground before and after readings. I make sure my space is clear. I meditate. I get myself into a space where I'm not personally invested. This is absolutely vital. You really do have to separate yourself out from it in that sense, because this isn't about your own ego need or whatever else. This is about being of service to the absolute best of your abilities. And then I'll start to tune into their energy, because I read psychically as well as with cards. So I'll start to tune into their energy, start the call, because it's usually an online call. Usually I'll lead a client through a few breathing exercises at the start to get them clear as well. And then we start talking, and I start reading, and we have a conversation. Ideally, we identify some action points during that as well. I mean, yeah, I can read predictively, but ideally there's more going on than that, and we're actually having a plan to move things forward in the direction that the client actually wants. And once the reading is over and I've dealt with any follow-up, I close myself down, I ground again, I make sure to eat, I make sure to drink. If I have another client lined up, I make sure it's a break in between. Like, I mean, if I'm reading at a fair, fine, it's back to back, but don't read clients back to back privately if you can help it. Give yourself some time in between to separate energies out and everything else. And if you possibly can, once the reading is over, put it out of your mind. Put it way, way, way out of your mind. Like, if a client comes to me, I may have some recall of parts of a reading I've done for them before, But generally I don't. Generally, once it's over, I release that because I need to, and then I move on from it, and I don't think about it, because if they have feedback or questions or whatever, they'll come to me. But mostly I need to free up their energy so as they can do whatever they need to with it.
Yeah, I'm the same but different. I have a really strong memory for, like, some repeat clients have said to me, I can't fucking believe you can remember the names of my kids. What? My therapist doesn't remember the name of my kids. I'll be like, how's so and so doing at uni? But that's just how I am. I've got a very good memory recall. But emotionally wise, I cannot afford afterwards, and this is a conversation I have with so many card slingers, like, how do I stop worrying that what I gave was the right stuff? And what about if later I think of other things the cards might have been trying to say that could have been just as good? And I always say, honey, if you're thinking about that for anywhere over 15 minutes after the reading is done, you need to stop and grab a crystal or some shit, because you can't do that. You have given of yourself, and you have to trust that in that moment that was what needed to come through, and you have got to trust that. You've got to relax. It's like worrying about, I don't know, the plane nose diving. Only the pilot needs to be worried about that. You cannot fly. You're not going to be able to break into the cockpit and sort shit out if it all starts to go downhill. So what is the point in worrying about it? And I feel very sort of similar in that sense, in that I have to let it go. And some of my repeat clients, I've had them for, some of them will be watching this now, and I've literally done 20 readings with them, and I know their life. I know the journey they've taken. I've known different relationships they've been in. I've known them as they've moved from one country to another. So I definitely am at risk of sitting there afterwards going, oh God, I really hope that was really helpful, and I really hope that that's okay and that's enough. And I have to stop that. I'll always be able to remember the details, but I have to stop with, and if I can't, of course, there's notes anyway from, previous records, and I can jog my memory. But taking the emotions with me, it's not going to be good, and it's going to mean that the next client that comes along doesn't get their money's worth, which is not fair. And it's kind of thinking like that as well, isn't it? It's like, I have to be a clear channel for the next person. It's not fair on them. They've spent the money as well, and if I'm worried about the last thing I did, I'm not going to be there for them being that channel.
And again, I'll retain details in that sense. So somebody calls me back up, and I'm like, yeah, I remember their partner's name, where they live, where they've moved from, what they've been through, but only in that moment. It's like very safely filed away outside of that time, and that's to do with my own internal process and how I deal with memory in general. So that's advantageous, if you like. But you said it's the emotional stuff, it's the energetic stuff as well. And ideally, yeah, I'll have a gap in between clients. But I also mentioned I do hotline work. If I'm on a busy day on there, I can go call after call after call after call. And therefore I'm going from person to person to person. And that can have its own challenges, and you also have to be much faster on that, because someone's paying you by the second, basically. So that's a whole other deal. But it's about detaching as much as you can. Now, what you will find ultimately as well is that different clients feel very, very different in that regard as well. Some people have what you might pick up on is a really, really powerful energy, or you might feel into some really, really difficult stuff that they're dealing with. And I'm clairsentient, so I pick this stuff up inevitably. So there are times when I'm literally feeling whatever they're feeling, and that's why that time in between is so necessary, because somebody can be going through something really, really traumatic or nasty or difficult, or you may just be reading on something that relates to that and the patterns that's triggered or whatever else. You then have to regain your own integrity afterwards. You don't want this blurring, because it's messy in that sense. Whether they're reflecting something within you or not, you still need that separation, and that's healthy for them as well, because, and obviously this depends on your own belief system, how you choose to work, but if you view things in any way and relate it to energetic connections or chords or whatever else, or just a blurring of fields. What you don't want is for them to have you in their space afterwards, to be honest. I feel that that's also, you know, really unethical to start thinking about somebody who you have a working relationship with in that sense. You know, for me, you still affect them then, and actually then you're not allowing them to be as free to do what they need to as they want, because you're projecting something there, and you can't now. Does that mean that it doesn't happen? Does that mean I never fall into that? I'm getting better at it. I'm finding better methods. I'm getting faster as well. And that's also kind of crucial, because you don't want to have a day off after every reading, or 2 days off after every reading, or whatever else.
Yeah.
You've also got to allow yourself space to decompress. That's the other thing. Like you don't want to be doing this, in my opinion, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't feel that you want to be doing that. You need time to recover from this. And I feel that anyone working with somebody in this way is going to have that experience. You know, most counselors or psychotherapists don't work all day, every day. They have set working hours. And am I disciplined enough to always have set working hours? No. But I'm working towards that. And as I get busier, it's easier for me to structure my time and be like, okay, that's work time, that's psychic time. And this is not. And this is not psychic time. And not only is this not psychic time or not reading time, but I'm not going to spend this time talking about work. I'm not going to spend this time only talking about woo-woo or whatever else. I'm going to try and have some grounded, normal conversations with people I care about their lives, or I'm going to go and watch Netflix for a bit, or whatever else I need to do that is not that, because you need to. You can't have a job consume your entire life, no matter what it is. Otherwise, why are you doing it? Because if you just want work to take over your entire life, then you're just going to go and do a regular 9 to 5 or whatever and have done with it.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think for me, I've learned over time that the optimum amount of live video readings that I can do, so where you've got the interaction, the discussion. I also do pre-recorded video readings. So how many of them can I do a day, and how many full-length email readings can I do a day? My email readings are minimum 1,000 words, but they usually run to about 1,500. So it took me a long time to figure out, oh, I can't actually do any more than really 5 pre-recorded video readings per day. When I try and do 6 or 7, I am burned out. And the next day, I'm usually quite high on it on the day I'm doing it. I'm like, I'm a superwoman, I'm magnanimous, I can keep going forever. And then the next day, I've got 3 video readings to do, and I'm like, oh my god, kill me now, I can't. And then I'm really drained. And so it took me a long time to realize, oh, 4, 5 maximum. 4 is my optimum for this. 3 if it's email. There's no way you can do more than 3 email, because that's writing and editing. And then with the lives, 4 as well is the optimum. And it's just learning that. And it took me a really long time to learn that. I think when you first become self-employed and you know you can manage your own time, I mean, I know that you are an astrology woman, and I'm getting a little bit more there as time goes on, and knowing my Virgo moon and how that kicked in after my Saturn return. I mean, literally the shadow of the Virgo moon is to think, I don't know, the horizon of like the next morning or the evening of the day, it's like way over there. I've got time for 70 readings. I've got time for everything, no problem. And literally then I get to the end of the day and I'm like, no, you realistically only had 12 hours maximum. You fucked it. There was no way you were going to get all this done. So I get very giddy about how much I can do. And it took me a long time to be like, not only can I only do 4 to 5 maximum a day, but I need a day off in the week. Wednesday, I don't touch my cards. I don't do anything to do with readings. I do creative stuff. I might do a little bit of email. I go for a walk. I see somebody. I have sane conversations about other things. Yeah. So, and I realized I needed that. And that took for Joanna DeVoe to literally be like, you need a day where you don't do this. I'm telling you now, I'm sending my hands in from LA and shaking you lovingly. And so it took for someone else to tell me that. And I'm so glad. Wednesday, I don't remember the last time I did a reading on a Wednesday. So I needed to have that. And I think that's what people learn as they become, because obviously when you first want to run a business as a pro card slinger, to me, I always say you do need to work hard at getting your name out there, the marketing, the audience building, the content creation. And when I do business mentoring, sometimes when I say, what's your key platforms? And if somebody says Twitter, like that's where I've got the largest audience. And I say, okay, cool. What are you doing on Twitter every day? Well, I wake up, I scroll in the morning. If I like something, I retweet it. And I'm waiting for the next bit, like, uh-huh. And if it doesn't come, I'm like, okay, audience building has got to be part of what you put in at the beginning when you become a pro card slinger. You cannot slack on it. If you have a lighthouse and the light is not on, boats will not come because they do not know it's there. The light that you put on is via social media, whatever your key platforms are. I'm not going to be rigid about what your key platform should be. That's down to the individual, and I think it's down to personality type. But it's got to be some really, it's got to be work. You've got to grind. You've got to graft at it. And I would say that, but I think at where the time comes where you can start to pay your bills and your rent, that's where you really need to start thinking about the optimum amount of time you spend on social media as well, because that's another place where burnout can come. It's maybe not as serious a burnout as if you can't serve your clients properly, but it's all connected, isn't it? If you start burning yourself out on social media, and then combined with that doom and gloom mindset you were talking about earlier, where it's like, I've got to do something now or my business is going to tank, what am I going to do? And all of that leads to burnout too. And I really like what you said about eating and drinking between clients. And I think moving around as well. I've got a tendency to sit there, start setting up for another reading. I might drink there at my card slinging table, but I don't get up. That's no good. You need to get the blood pumping, and that gets you excited about the next reading as well. So I pretty much have all the same advice as you on preparing and decompressing and all of that. One thing I did really want to ask you is, do you have times where you never want to look at a deck of tarot cards again? Or is that something you predict for your future, but it hasn't come along yet?
I mean, there are days when you wake up and you just don't feel in the zone. You don't want to work that day. You've like had enough, done enough, all this other stuff going on, and it's just like, ugh. And that can be an external influence. It can be like the busiest ever day I've had. I read for 61 hotline clients on the same day, and unsurprisingly, the next day, I just wanted to stop in bed for a chunk of it and then go out for a walk, get some sunshine, this kind of thing. But I didn't want to read or work that day. There was just absolutely no way. Other times it's not like, other times it's more, there can be an anxiety thing, there can be an apprehension thing. But then when I actually do my prep and sit down and just do it, it's really, really straightforward. So it's also that even if I'm doing like a YouTube live, and I tend to do those once or twice a week at the moment, I can be like a bit all over the shop beforehand, but I sit down and do it and I'm fine with it and I feel better afterwards. So it's almost like you're flipping a switch as well. And sometimes you just don't have the juice for that, and that's okay. But and the other thing with that, I would say really clearly, and it doesn't happen often, but very occasionally, you might have to contact a client on the day of a reading and let them know that you're just not in a fit state to work that day and can you reschedule. And it's not something you're going to do all the time or whatever, but that's about, can I deliver the service that I'm supposed to today? Because if I can't, I'm going to be honest about that rather than anything else,
So
so
glad you mentioned
oh,
that.
all of that can come up. I love my cards. um you know I feel like I'm normally inclined to read for other people who've hired me for it. That's fine. Whether I'm always inclined to read for myself is a whole other story entirely, in terms of what I'm ready to be exposed to. And that's kind of okay, because I know what happens when I read for myself. I know what's going to come up. I also know that I'm not the best person in the world at taking my own advice. So it's really, really complicated in that sense. But by and large, no. I do things that help. I change my decks up a lot frequently. I change my approaches frequently. Like every reading I do is going to be different ultimately because I have to change the approach in order to kind of really be able to click, in order to kind of be able to respond to what's in front of me.
Oh my
But
God, that you said
I've
that.
got, yeah, I mean, I'm taking a 10-day holiday later this month, and I am looking forward to that. That's a good thing. It's my first holiday in 6 years. It's very badly needed, and I am setting an intention that I mean, you said obviously, yeah, you work online, you can work when you're traveling. I don't plan to. I really don't plan to. I want 10 days of not doing this. I want 10 days of being on holiday because if you're on holiday, please be on holiday.
Yes,
Please be
totally.
on holiday when you're on holiday. Please go
I,
and do things that you want to do that are fun. And yes, this can be fun, but go and do fun things that are not work if you possibly can. Please. Like, it's not going to be bad. The sky isn't going to fall in. If people can't book you for a week, they will survive. They will be okay. They don't need to have, clients don't need to have a relationship with you where they can always get you the next day. If they can, then great. But if not, that's okay. And
yeah,
it's professional as well. It's professional to not be constantly available, constantly in on mode, anything like it. You gotta have a life beyond that. You really do, if you
absolutely.
possibly can. And fine, when you're self-employed and you're not earning much, that's not always easy to arrange. And you're like, if I just do a bit more, maybe I can grind out a bit more money. And I fall into this trap all the time, but I'm a
Hmm.
Capricorn, like I'm bound to. But it's still the case that part of self-discipline is also disciplining yourself not to work at times. And you're
Yeah,
going to do better if you can do that than if you just bang your head on that wall constantly because it's the next big thing, it's the next big push, it's whatever. That's also, to be honest, it's a mindset that then I feel is totally unfair on you and everyone else because it's a mindset that says, well, if I just do this a bit harder, even though I've got no more in the tank, then I'm bound to make the breakthrough. And no, it's like, well, no, actually, maybe you'll make more of a breakthrough or do better if you allow yourself some downtime because your body's telling you you need that, the situation's telling you you need that. So you need to slow it up at that time. And
yeah,
what you may find after a couple of days off is you come back and then you're super busy and you're super in the zone because you've actually taken your own needs seriously. And you may find that you're also, you may be earning more that way as well. You may not,
yeah,
but you got to kind of look after your own needs in the middle of this because you haven't got a supervisor to either crack the whip on you, but nor do you have a supervisor to say, look, you're looking tired. Why don't you take some time off or take it easy or cut yourself some slack? You've got to do that for yourself. And
absolutely.
that's tricky, especially when you want to help. It's tricky, but you got to.
I have so much to say on what you've just said, but the first thing I want to make sure I get out there is when you say it's not healthy to make yourself available to your clients all the time, that's something that I see. I'm in quite a few tarot groups on Facebook, and people that are only just getting into this, I've seen quite a few people leave, posts on there saying, I don't know what to do. I give my clients readings and they want to come back for extra cards, or they want to clarify things, or they're in my inbox and they're there and they're there. And I feel like I've set a precedent with them that I'm going to be available and I'm going to answer another question, or I'm going to pull a clarifying card. And of course, that's all about boundaries. And over the course of time, as you get a website, or as you get your terms and conditions somewhere to be read, if you're a pro card slinger, of course, you should always have a website, and your T's and C's should be there. You will add to things over the course of time. And one thing that I've got in my T's and C's is that any correspondence between sessions is only at my discretion. If you have things you want to update me on, if you have questions you want to ask, if I've got the time, you're welcome to send me the email, and it's if I've got the time, I'll get back to you. But I prefer everything to be on the clock, and then I'm really working for you fully. You've got my absolute attention. I'm not doing something else over here or over here. And also it's respectful and fair to me. It's payment for my time. So, and it took me ages to put that in my terms and conditions, ages, because I was like, well, you know, I think a lot of people say to themselves, it's a caring profession. It's a compassionate profession. I don't read the cards to make megabucks, you know. I'm not selling like trainers or mobile phones. This is something where I really want to connect with someone and I want to help them. And it's like, yeah, but there has to be limits and boundaries, and there has to be a professional working environment. Otherwise, you're not helping them. You're going to be enabling them. And with the, I'm lucky that the audience that I've built up and the clientele that I have, I very rarely have to worry about that kind of thing where I'm being pushed for extra stuff. But in the beginning, when I was just feeling out what I was capable of doing, oh my goddess, I so needed to just say, I can't answer these questions. This is not on the clock. This, I can't do this. No, we can't have another call. Like you'll have to pay again for us to do more. And I realized over the course of time, that's actually how you help somebody properly. It's not a heartless thing to do. It doesn't mean you don't care about what you're providing for people. It means you care as much as you can, which is why you want to be on when you talk to somebody. And being on when you talk to somebody is about getting paid for a time that is pre-arranged. And the other thing I love that you said is you do sometimes have to just reschedule. And I think that that's something where people feel so loath to do that, but I've had to do it a couple of times because of my spine. Usually I've got chronic pain, and fortunately for me, I've been very honest about it along my journey. And I just feel as long as you give people as much notice as possible. Look, it's happened to me with my personal trainer, my accountant. Everybody's got a day where they're like, I'm really sorry, I can't do this. Why should we not also have that? And then also, oh my God, there was something else I wanted to say, change of approach and changing decks. And another thing I wanted to say that I really agree with, like, as in not, you know, making sure you don't fall out of love with your cards. Because for me, like, I've got my rucksack right here because I had to pull my charger out before I started talking to you. And I've actually got a mini deck in here just in case I need to do a reading for somebody on the train or at my friend's house. I mean, I never get sick of it. But I think a lot of it is, firstly, I do also go on holidays where I don't take the cards with me and I don't touch them. Same, I think it's really important to do. And also I do change up my approach. I change up my decks regularly. I bring other things to the front that I haven't seen for ages. And you can do that even if you work with 3 decks or looking up different definitions. That's another way. If you start to get sick of your cards, I think it's really about going and searching for ways that people have described the cards that you've never heard before and being like, oh, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple of things on like boundaries. One is that the boundaries you set are going to change what you're then exposed to, and it happens quickly. Like in my first year, I would get messages asking for free readings. I haven't had a message asking for a free reading for a very, very long time now, because it's just no. And I don't even have long conversations prior to someone booking anymore either, generally speaking. You know, I will very occasionally offer a sliding scale for somebody genuinely in need, but somebody doing so usually isn't somebody who approaches me and the first thing they say is, I want a discount. You know, it's usually someone you get to know and you come across that. Couple of other things you've mentioned, like carrying cards with you everywhere. Like I've had certain experiences recently where I've had to set boundaries with friends, for example, where I've arranged to see someone socially, and then they're like, oh, whilst you're here, can you do me a reading? And I'm like, no, I can't. No, I can't. This is my social time. You want to book a reading with me, you can, and that's okay. But no, this is my downtime. This is my downtime. And if I was motivated to pull cards for you in the middle of it, maybe I would do. But this is a friendship, and that's a business arrangement. And yes, I will take on friends as clients, and that's absolutely fine. But there has to be a line here, you know. And it's the same with people using my personal messages or my personal email about work stuff, and I'm like, well, no, here's my Facebook business page, here's my Instagram, and here's my work email, and that's where these things get conducted, and they don't happen in my personal space. And you have to get, I feel, sharp on this, because this is also about it not taking over your life, and you don't want it to take over your life in that way. So yeah, I often carry cards with me, but that doesn't mean that I'm just available at the drop of a hat to start pulling them for people. I might pull them for myself if I'm in a situation where I want to use them, but that's a whole other matter. And if somebody wants to arrange for me to read for them when I'm seeing them socially, that's fine, but schedule it. We'll schedule that. Okay, that is when we're doing that, and then that goes away. That goes away, and we do not talk about that once the reading is complete. We then go and do other normal people stuff, or whatever you want to call it, but non-reading stuff, because it has to be like that. Otherwise, this just blurs in, it blends in, and it becomes a mess. It becomes a complete energetic mess, you know.
Absolutely.
It's the same, and it's the same reason why I would advise, and everyone can take their own approach, but if you're a professional reader, do you really want to do free readings as well? I would say no, generally speaking. You might do practice readings somewhere. You might have a new spread you want to work on, or a new approach you want to take, and you might want to get some practice on that. But once you're doing this professionally and taking money for readings, if somebody approaches you for a freebie, I would say do not take it on. Do not take it on. Freebie clients don't become paying clients, because it's a different game, because there's less invested. I know that if I get a freebie off someone, I take it far less seriously than if I paid for it. And like, you know, we can talk about why that is. We can talk about the role of money in society. We can talk about all of these things ultimately. But at the end of the day, if you have nothing invested in something, then you're less likely to take it seriously. And that sucks. That really sucks. And I would like it to not be like that. But we're dealing with deeply rooted psychology here. And, you know, whether you can argue that that's innate, whether you can argue that's learned societally, whatever you want to deconstruct it, you're still working within this milieu, you're still working within this culture, and you have to have your own professional boundaries around that as well. And like, this is just, I could like give stacks of examples of this stuff, but it is all about that. And it's also about, yeah, curtailing, as you said, the amount of written or whatever contact between readings, you know.
Yeah.
And keeping these things separate. You know, I've had a bunch of clients send me friend requests on Facebook, and I don't normally accept them.
I don't either.
Because that's my personal space. That's my personal space. And if there's somebody who I'm then, you know, I have a social connection to outside of that, great. But otherwise, I'm kind of like, I really need this space to not be taken up by that, you know. And it's just about being able to maintain those boundaries when you need to, you know.
Totally. I love that. Yeah. Do you know what? I knew that this deep chat was going to be packed full of advice for people that want to be readers, or people that are readers and they're at the beginning of their journey or whatever. But I actually am stunned how many points we've hit on that are the main things that people ask or that people have questions about. So I couldn't be happier with how this has gone. Zelda, thank you so much for talking to me. I know I'm going to put in the down bar like your Instagram, where I'm follow you on Instagram, and you're always doing these amazing daily readings and stuff, and you always look fucking immaculate as well. So that, I must admit, that's also a reason I watch. I'm like, what dress has she got on today? Let's have a look. But you know what I'm like with clothes and stuff. But I'm going to put IG down there. I'm going to put YouTube. I'm going to put your website. Is there anything else I need to make sure that I put down there, or that you need to say about where people can get hold of you if they want a reading or more from you?
Apart from that, it's just my Facebook and my email. It's the standard social contacts. I'm working a couple of events very shortly, but this video may not be up by the time those happen. But I am available for events as well, be they public events, be they private events. Like, you're welcome to contact me for those as well. I'm kind of, if you feel you want to connect with me over anything else as well, because there's other stuff, you know, that I could have talked about, like what it means to do this kind of work whilst you're disabled, because I'm disabled, what it means to do this kind of work whilst you're trans, because I'm trans. And you could, you know, if there's stuff that I can help with around that, or if you fit into those categories and you're wondering how those work out when you're doing this kind of work, like, you can get in touch with me. That's kind of absolutely fine. You know, I've mentioned, I did say, obviously, I don't do loads of back and forth in between readings, but, you know, I'm still going to be supportive with people dealing with similar stuff to me that isn't directly around the content of a reading, you know. So if you want to connect with me around that stuff, you absolutely can. I'd be really happy to kind of, you know, link up with you and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and also, guys, let me know down below if there's anything that you feel you'd like to have Zelda back for in that regard, because I'm not adverse at all to having deep chats with the same people on different things, and I can fully imagine myself doing that, because I know the people I love to chat with, and I know the people I have rapport with, and I'm never happy with what we touched on there. I could always go on for another hour. So yeah, let me know if there's anything, because I feel like pro card slinging on the fringes, on the margins, as it were, and bringing in all of your different identities and stuff, that is something that we talk about a lot more now, and I know a lot of my audience are interested in it and it's relevant to them. So let's have a discussion down below about anything else you might want to see or have chats about. And Zelda, thank you so much for joining me for a deep chat episode, babe. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.